For nearly 23 years, Daniel Harper walked the exact same route. Every weekday at 8:15 in the morning, he stepped out of the small post office in Cedar Falls, Ohio, carrying a weathered leather mailbag over his shoulder. Rain, snow, blazing summer heat. It didn't matter. Daniel believed that if people could count on one thing in life, it should be their mail arriving on time. To most people, he was simply the mailman. Nobody knew that every afternoon after finishing his route, Daniel drove home wondering whether his life would ever become more than routines and bills. At 48 years old, he had no college degree, no investments, and barely enough savings to cover a few months of expenses. His wife had passed away 6 years earlier, and his daughter Emily had recently moved across the country after getting married. The quiet house felt emptier every day. Still, Daniel never complained. His father had once told him, "Character isn't measured by how exciting your job is. It's measured by how well you do it." Those words stayed with him. One chilly Tuesday morning in October, everything changed. While sorting the day's mail, Daniel noticed a thick cream-colored envelope, unlike anything he had seen before. It wasn't flashy, no gold lettering, no company logo, just a handwritten name, Mr. Walter Bennett. The address pointed to an old farmhouse nearly 5 miles outside Daniel's normal neighborhood. That wasn't unusual. What caught Daniel's attention was the return address. There wasn't one. When he arrived at the farmhouse later that morning, something felt off. Usually, Walter Bennett met him on the front porch with a smile and a joke. Walter was 82 years old, a retired carpenter who had lived alone ever since his wife passed away. But today, no one answered the door. Daniel knocked again. Nothing. He glanced toward the mailbox, still full from yesterday. That had never happened before. After waiting another minute, Daniel decided to walk around the side of the house. The curtains were open. Inside, he could see Walter lying on the living room floor. Daniel dropped his mailbag. He immediately called 911. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Walter had suffered a stroke during the night. Doctors later told Daniel something that sent chills down his spine. "If you hadn't checked on him this morning," one of them said, "he probably wouldn't have survived." Daniel visited Walter at the hospital a week later. The old carpenter smiled weakly. "I guess you delivered more than mail," Daniel laughed. "I was just doing my job." Walter slowly shook his head. "No, you did more than that." Before Daniel left, Walter asked him for one favor. "When I get home, remind me to show you something." Daniel thought nothing of it. A month later, Walter was finally back at the farmhouse. Although he walked with a cane now, his smile had returned. As promised, he invited Daniel inside after the day's delivery. The house looked frozen in time. Old woodworking tools lined the walls. Black and white family photos covered nearly every shelf. Walter disappeared into another room before returning with a dusty wooden box. "I've been waiting for the right person." Daniel frowned. "I think you've got the wrong guy." Walter chuckled. "No, I've had plenty of time to think." He unlocked the box. Inside were hundreds of handwritten letters, each carefully tied together with faded blue ribbons. Daniel looked confused. "What are these?" Walter picked up one bundle carefully. "My entire life." Over the next hour, Walter explained something Daniel never expected. For nearly 60 years, he had written one letter every Sunday night, sometimes to his wife, sometimes to himself, sometimes to people he admired but never met, sometimes to complete strangers who had unknowingly changed his life. Most of the letters had never been mailed. "They helped me think," Walter said quietly. "They reminded me who I wanted to become." Daniel turned one over in his hands. The handwriting was beautiful. "So why are you showing me this?" Walter smiled. "Because there's one letter left." He reached beneath the box and removed a single sealed envelope. "This one has to be delivered." Daniel noticed there was only one line written on the front. "Deliver only when the time is right." "No address?" Walter nodded. "Not yet." Daniel laughed. "That's not exactly how the postal service works." Walter laughed too. "I know." The room fell silent. Finally, Walter leaned closer. "I have a feeling you'll know where it belongs." Daniel drove home that evening, unable to stop thinking about the mysterious envelope. For days he tried to forget about it, but every time he delivered mail, Every time he walked past another front door, he remembered Walter's words, "You'll know where it belongs." 2 weeks later, Walter passed away peacefully in his sleep. Daniel attended the funeral along with fewer than 20 people. Walter had no close relatives, no children, no brothers or sisters left alive. After the service, the attorney handling Walter's estate approached Daniel. "Mr. Harper?" "Yes." "Walter left specific instructions for you." The attorney handed him the same sealed envelope, along with a short handwritten note. It read, "Some letters aren't meant to arrive quickly. They're meant to arrive exactly when someone is ready to receive them." Daniel stared at the envelope during the drive home. He had delivered millions of letters throughout his career, but this was the first one that carried the weight of an entire lifetime, and he still had absolutely no idea who it was meant for. Little did he know. Within the next few days, one unexpected delivery would connect the envelope to a stranger whose life, and his own, would never be the same. Daniel placed Walter's envelope inside the top drawer of his kitchen table. Every morning before leaving for work, he'd glance at it. Every evening, he'd wonder the same thing. Who was it for? Weeks passed. November turned into December, and the holiday season transformed Daniel's route into its busiest time of the year. Packages stacked higher than ever, children waited by their windows for deliveries, and neighbors exchanged Christmas cards. Life returned to normal, or so Daniel thought. One snowy Friday afternoon, he knocked on the door of a small blue house at the edge of town. A young woman answered while trying to calm a crying little boy. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's been a rough day." Daniel smiled and handed her a certified letter. As she signed for it, he noticed dozens of unpaid bills scattered across the kitchen table. The woman thanked him and quietly closed the door. It wasn't the first family Daniel had seen struggling, but something about the sadness in her eyes stayed with him. Later that evening, he couldn't stop thinking about Walter's words. Some letters aren't meant to arrive quickly. For reasons he couldn't explain, Daniel pulled Walter's envelope from the drawer again. He carefully examined every inch of it. That's when he noticed something he had somehow missed before. Pressed into the paper was a nearly invisible imprint, not written in ink, embossed into the envelope itself. It read, "To the person who believes their story is already over." Daniel froze. This wasn't addressed to a specific name. It was addressed to a person. For the first time, he understood. Walter had never expected him to find one individual. He expected Daniel to recognize the right moment. The next morning, Daniel returned to the blue house. The young woman looked surprised. "I don't have any mail today." "I know," Daniel replied. "I just wanted to ask, are you doing okay?" For a second, she tried to smile. Then the tears came. Her name was Sarah. Her husband had died in a construction accident the previous year. Medical bills had consumed their savings. She worked 2 jobs while raising her 6-year-old son, Ethan. She admitted something she'd never told anyone. "I don't think I'm strong enough anymore." Daniel listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer easy advice. When she finished, he slowly reached into his bag. "I think someone wanted you to have this." Sarah looked confused. "There isn't even my name on it." "There doesn't have to be." She carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The ink had faded slightly with age. It began with a simple sentence. "If you're reading this, life has probably convinced you that you're alone." Sarah's hands trembled. She kept reading. Walter wrote about losing his own wife, about sitting in an empty house, about believing his best days were behind him. Then came the line that changed everything. "The hardest seasons convince us they've become our permanent address. They haven't. Keep walking." Another paragraph followed. "Someone you've never met is quietly rooting for you. Sometimes hope arrives in an envelope instead of a miracle." Sarah wiped away tears. By the time she reached the final page, she was smiling for the first time in months. At the bottom, Walter had written, "When life becomes kind to you again, become the reason someone else believes tomorrow is worth seeing." She folded the letter carefully. "I needed this today." Daniel simply nodded. So did Walter, years ago. Word about the mysterious letter spread through Cedar Falls. Not because Sarah told everyone, because people noticed the change. She laughed again. She smiled. She started volunteering at the community center on weekends. Months later, she organized a free support group for families who had lost loved ones. Daniel watched quietly from a distance. Then something unexpected happened. One afternoon, Sarah handed Daniel a sealed envelope. "What's this?" "My letter." Daniel frowned. "I don't understand." "I wrote it for someone who hasn't met me yet." Within weeks, another letter appeared, then another. Teachers, firefighters, nurses, a retired veteran, a local baker. People began writing anonymous letters filled with encouragement, hope, and hard-earned wisdom. Daniel offered to keep them safe inside the old wooden box Walter had given him. The collection grew, 50 letters, then 100, then nearly 500, each waiting for the right person. Local newspapers eventually heard the story. Soon television stations arrived. They called it the Letter Project. Communities in neighboring towns wanted to start their own collections. Then other states joined. No one was paid, no one became famous. People simply wrote because someone, somewhere, might need to hear exactly those words. A year later, Daniel retired from the Postal Service. His coworkers expected him to travel, or finally relax. Instead, he accepted a different responsibility. Every week he visited schools, hospitals, shelters, and community centers carrying Walter's old wooden box. He no longer delivered bills, advertisements, or packages. He delivered hope. One spring afternoon, nearly 3 years after Walter's funeral, Daniel received an unexpected package. Inside was a framed photograph. It showed Sarah and Ethan standing outside their first home. On the back was a handwritten message. "You delivered more than a letter. You delivered a future." Daniel smiled. Then he looked toward the empty leather mailbag hanging beside his front door. For 23 years, he had believed his job was to carry envelopes from one address to another. Walter had shown him something different. The greatest deliveries are not measured by miles. They're measured by the lives they quietly change. Sometimes the most important message isn't the one with the correct address. It's the one that reaches the right heart at exactly the right time. And somewhere, in towns across America, strangers still open handwritten letters from people they've never met. Many never learn who wrote them. They don't need to, because hope has never required a return address.